John, you have such a fascinating story. You're rebranding the city of Las Vegas. You're a brand expert. You've worked with Gary Vee, Hormozi, these bigger name in those spaces.
I found out I was adopted when I was 8. That was very challenging as I was growing up because I was like, well, I don't even belong here. In a way, like creativity actually like saved my life. But what it taught me as a teen, it was like I could think of something and I could create something that never existed and it could make you feel something.
What was like a major success? What was a major failure?
Yeah, I think major success was the buy-in we got from the community. That was a huge success. The failure that I saw is how long it took to make decisions through the executive level. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, especially when you rebrand a whole entire city. I learned a lot from that. So I got to see under the hood of what it took to build this type of creative agency and how it works.
Has Nashville branded itself well?
Oh gosh, you're going to get me in trouble.
Hello and welcome to the XPLR.NASH podcast. We are glad that you are taking the time to listen to this. This episode today is brought to you by Go Explore. This is your custom tailored loyalty platform that we have built. Contact us at hello@goexplore.io, or you can go to goexplore.io and you can learn about this loyalty program if you have a business and what this means for you. Joining me on today's episode is a dear friend, John Mediana. What's up, brother?
Hey.
John, you have such a fascinating story of, and you broke it down to me a couple weeks ago of this adoption story. I want to get into that. I want to get into the brand awareness and the brand things that you have worked on because you are a brand expert. And, well, I would say if you're rebranding the city of Las Vegas, you're a brand expert. Just a small little thing. You've worked with some bigger influential content creators, Gary Vee, Hormozi, some of these bigger, Sean, what's his last name? Yeah. And so you're working
recently,
John Crist. And so you're working with a lot of these bigger name in those spaces in YouTube business. And so there's a lot that we're going to get to in this interview. But first, let's hear what brought you to Nashville.
Yeah. And,
your story to get here. And then we'll get into the other things.
Yeah. I think, the simple answer to what brought me here is God himself. No, but
did he drag you?
He completely dragged me here, bro.
Okay.
Like, no, I was in Vegas. We were living in Vegas, but me and my wife were from the West Coast. Los Angeles. And then, we moved to Vegas in 2018 and
are you glad that you left the West Coast?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It was the best move of our life. I could safely say that. Yeah.
From the West Coast to Vegas?
From the West Coast.
Or to West Coast to here?
Here.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we still have family, love our friends out there. You know, I like watching it from afar.
Yeah.
You know, but here.
Like destroying itself from afar or more of.
Listen, you said it, not me.
I did say it.
It's like, you know, it's imploding. We pray for the West, you know.
Pray for the West.
But, you know, like a lot of stories, right? You hear the typical kind of transition stories or those stories that, you know, people either did 3 things during COVID, right? It was either they left their jobs, they left their homes or left their, you know, city, or they left their relationships. For a lot of people that I talked to, all 3 happened. And, you know, thank God only 2 of those things happened, you know, for me. But during the pandemic, we were like, all right, well, what's left here for us? We're going to have another child. So I have 2 kids, 2 boys. They're amazing. And we're like, we don't have any family around here. We need more babysitters.
That's a great reason to live in your family.
Yeah, I was like, dude, we just need to be. And my wife's family, you know, they had moved out here about 7-8 years ago, and they slowly started coming out here, you know, one by one. And we were like, listen, I think the move's Nashville. Let's pray about it. And God, you know, I was like, listen, if it's a move, God better be in it. So he allowed us to sell a house and buy a house, doing a 1031 exchange within 2 months. And so we were selling a house and bought a house out here within that time frame. And I was like, this has got to be God, because it could not be so much.
Especially if a 1031 exchange on a personal real estate transaction, it's more 1031s, from my understanding, is strictly more on the commercial side,
right? Yeah,
of rental properties and stuff, and so like that's a huge thing.
Oh yeah, to a point where our real estate agent in Vegas worked directly with his cousin, who's a real estate agent here in Nashville, to work the deals. Like, so I was like, you have a cousin that's in real estate in Nashville. So as we're selling that property, you have direct communication with your cousin selling, like helping us get through this property, and it just worked out. So I was like, all right, well, that's cool. And I've already like traveled so much to Nashville. It's almost like a second home because of the work I've done in the past, you know, directing music videos and working with record labels and all that stuff too. So it was like a second home, and be like, okay, well, there's a lot of business here. I know that. But that first component is like, all right, God, is this the move? And he made it very clear. Now we're here.
So since you got here, what are a few things about the Nashville market that you find unique compared to the West Coast? What are things that you and your family absolutely love to experience and do?
Yeah. One thing that we actually enjoy is just the history. Number one, that's what stuck out to me, is just like the history of Nashville. I mean, a big influence in the music. Obviously, it's called Music City, but just the historical kind of footprint that Nashville has, it was fascinating to me. You know, the other part to it is just the culture and people. You know, the West Coast and the coasts are pretty like different.
Yep.
You know, on the East Coast, or you know, New York, they come off as mean, but they're the nicest people. Like, you know, if you have a flat tire, like, what'd you do? You know,
why you going got flat tire?
Helping you in the West Coast.
They just leave you be.
They just leave you. You know, they'll be nice to you, but they'll just leave you be. And
do you feel like the West Coast is like the Good Samaritan story, where like the Samaritan's on the ground, they're just like, I'm gonna kick you while you're down?
Yeah. You know what? I can't say that as a blanket statement, but the run-ins that I've had, from, you know, it could take from that story.
Okay.
You know, of like, it's very competitive. I think it didn't start, you know, because I was born and raised in LA. So like,
is your area of town affected by the fires?
So thankfully, you know, I had called my parents recently, and they're not affected by it, you know, but I have a lot of friends that did lose their homes in that area, that was affected. A lot of my friends in Pasadena are getting some effects of it. Monrovia area are getting a little bit, you know, but having friends in the industry, you know, they've lost their studios, they lost their work, they lost their homes. It's so unfortunate, so devastating.
Yeah.
You know, it just broke my heart. I was calling everybody and texting everybody that I knew that would be around that area, and luckily, like they're all safe. You know, but to rebuild is just gonna be crazy. You know. So that's the devastating part.
So back to the journey of Nashville. The culture, the culture stands out, the people stand out. What's a aspect of history of Nashville that you've really enjoyed learning about?
Yeah, I mean, most of it, like I had spoken about, is like the music culture, like the influence of that. Also, you know, I was a part of this program last year called Leadership Gallatin, and the history of like, you know, of how the community and city was established, you know, especially
with DuPont and everything up there by the lake.
Right. And the things I had never known, you know, even like the thoroughbreeding and like horse, you know, kind of culture, and, you know, the things that happened even during the Civil War and that era, like how they all kind of migrated and how things were established out here. Like even Gallatin being the first state, even before Tennessee became state. Like, so there's a lot of history that I had no idea, that it carried, you know, and they're finding new artifacts, you know, on a daily basis, you know, from like old covered railroad tracks and like all these kinds of things, which is very fascinating to dive into the history of, you know, our country, you know, and how big of a part Nashville, specifically Tennessee, played that role. So it's fascinating.
So let's get a little bit into, okay. All right. Pause. Put a marker on that, Yoshi. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into it. Okay.
Yeah.
You should put a marker on that. All right. So let's get into branding.
Yeah.
From a city perspective.
Yeah.
So you went through Leadership Gallatin.
Mm-hmm.
Is Gallatin branding their city or their town well?
Yeah. Simple answer, yes. I believe that. Number one, because they had, it's like a yes and no, right? But let me dive into the yes part compared to other cities in brandings too. They brought in a specialist a couple years back to do some research, groundwork and research. And they do this pretty much every year as the ADA, does it, Economic Development Agency there.
Yep.
And they do a lot of census and a lot of things because they got to understand the population, the community, so they have all these drivers, traffic drivers and all those things. And then they did a rebrand a few years back, and it's probably like one of the, really like when I think of branding and stuff, especially as a city, like you want to have a brand voice as a city. So what they did well that a lot of cities typically hardly ever do or think about is putting an identity on the city. So that's one thing I think they did well. How that brand outlasts or the long play of that, we could have a debate about. But I don't see a lot of cities taking the initiative to give itself an identity or say, this is what we're going to be known for. And we're going to let people know when they enter the city. We're going to have, signs and things that encompass the values that we carry. So I think for the city of Gallatin, I think they've done a really great job.
So what's their tagline?
So their tagline is called "It's Grit and Grace."
Okay.
And they have a few other taglines too, but one of them had to do with a passing away of a local influential photographer, Sutter. So they had these sayings of like, it doesn't take much to love people, right? So like, or I don't know the exact slogan, like word for word, but. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty much saying like, hey, love your community. And in Reader's Digest a couple years ago, they were known as the friendliest city in the States.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
They were deemed the friendliest city.
According to Reader Digest.
Yes, yeah.
Was that a paid placement?
No, I don't think it was.
Okay. Because I know Reader I used to read Reader Digest. Right. That was my toilet reading back in the days before smartphones. So
before the smartphone.
Back in my day, man. I'm at that age.
Very analog.
So it getting into the spaces that we're in, it's interesting seeing like, Southern Living magazine's all pay to play, and these other things are all pay to play. So I'm like, is Reader Digest
I think
pay to play too?
Well, I think back then there was a more organic approach, and then what happens, especially in marketing. When something like pops off, people try to take advantage of making as much money as possible.
Of course.
So that's why we live currently in like a headline clickbait world.
Of course.
And the more offensive it could be, the more controversial the headline is, the more like it's going to get people to click and have that curiosity. So you also you lace in whatever you want to sell. So if they're selling these things, they do it very manipulatively and tactfully. Yeah. That's why like these magazines, how do they survive? How does print survive today versus digital? They have to have some sort of, unfortunately, they have
cash flow
angle and cash
flow. Okay. So back to the branding of cities.
Yeah.
Has Nashville branded itself well?
Oh gosh, you're going to get me in trouble. No, I don't think it has.
Why not?
Because it's gone past the life cycle of what it's known for. The life cycle.
Break that down more from a consumer standpoint.
Sure. So Nashville is known as Music City.
Yep.
Obviously,
we've had a couple nicknames. So we've had Athens of the South, Music City. Mm-hmm. We've had Cashville. That was a popular one.
Yeah. So you think of like the verticals of the city, right? So you got education. You got all the schools of Vanderbilt, the Athens of the South. Then you have the vertical, which brings, I guess, like the most attention, which is country music.
Yeah.
Right. Mostly. And then you have all this. So you have these different verticals, but
healthcare,
manufacturing, right? Technology,
distribution,
right? So distribution is really important. Manufacturing, yes, all those things. But I think the thing, like when you think as an outsider or consumer, you ask yourself, hey, like Nashville? Like when you think of cities like Vegas, what do you think of?
My initial gut thought is it's a party city. I think of the wheel, or not the wheel, the big eyeball LED thing now.
Oh yeah, the Sphere.
The Sphere.
Yeah,
that's what I think of immediately.
Yeah.
Because
it's iconic now. Yeah.
It's iconic, and it's become iconic in a year.
Yeah.
But it's like it's the most iconic building probably in the world right now.
Yeah,
especially of how many freaking memes are coming out of that building.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, I think of the Sphere. I think of it's a party scene. I think of conventions. I think of another immediate thought is the homeless population that lives in the tunnels under Vegas and how they're treated. And so the reason for that is because a couple of the YouTubers I watch, they do this investigative journalism where they go into these communities and they try learning like who the kingpins are and like they're doing this type of research. And so immediately when I think of Vegas, I think of those things. And then I think of, in my mindset of where I am, I think of good food too from Vegas.
Oh, the best food in the world.
And then I think of residencies. So it's a mixed bag of probably 10 things that I think of Vegas.
Yeah, right. So Vegas is a place where you actually could come and find your community, like find a place, like whatever your vice is.
It's there.
It's there, right? And you know it, and you could kind of isolate yourself in it and be like, well, if I wanted to go anywhere, I'd go here. When I think of like places like Nashville, you know, it has like when you ask people what Nashville is, right? They're like, oh, that's country music automatically, you know. But
I think from an international standpoint, it could be country music, Elvis Presley, Jack Daniels.
Right.
That's the three things I hear from an international standpoint.
Right. Yeah.
And that's probably how the United States views Nashville as well.
Right. So what you want to do to have a successful brand of a city is give it identity that can increase life cycles. So like when I think of
a life cycle being 40 years, 30 years, so like how long are you like a generation?
Yeah, I would say like, you know, Gen Zers is a lifestyle, like millennial, like can you actually touch on every generation? So when you think of Nashville, what generations can you actually encompass that's under an umbrella, right?
Well, for me, because I think it's I understand the statistics of the city. I understand
you know a lot more.
I understand more than most people, right? With the average median age of the city being 34, like I understand statistics and these things that most people probably don't consume everyday data, especially if they're relocating here or if they're visiting.
Exactly. So the whole thing of the life cycles is you might know the data and statistics, but it's not known.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not doing the best job communicating. So the biggest issue that I have with cities, like I believe like we have the most beautiful cities in the world, and there's so much history and all those things. If cities have done a better job taking the unique value proposition of what their city actually, like they know the data, they just don't know how to communicate that in an approachable way where people could consume that so easily to be like, oh, if I'm going to go here, if I'm going to go to Knoxville, or if I'm going to go to, you know, don't go to Memphis, but like,
you can go to Memphis if you want. Rendezvous is cool, but
but like,
make your way back to Nashville.
Yeah. But the idea here is they don't really do a good job of communicating that information through a consumable message.
Okay.
So like,
what cities do that well? My first 5 cities that came to mind: London, Rome, Tokyo. San Francisco, it was.
Yeah.
Toronto.
Okay.
And Vancouver.
What about Paris?
Paris is the top dog.
Right?
Yes. I think Paris is in a different category.
Oh, absolutely.
Than almost all of those other cities.
Yeah, you could look at all the places that the Olympics been, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like, oh, those are top cities, clearly. Right? So I think the ones that do it well are very clear in their messaging.
Yeah. Like American cities that have done it well, Vegas.
Yeah. Oh, well, Vegas is
Boston, for a while, Boston had a good marketing plan, a good run, especially early 2000s. They were doing good.
Yeah,
I think I was with the Patriots and a bunch of other things that were happening for that.
I think the term was marathon, right?
Other American cities, I think that was exactly the turnaround. Yeah, that's a good point. The Other American cities, Fort Lauderdale, like some Florida cities, not Orlando, they have not done well.
No.
Miami has done Miami has done better. Charleston has always been good.
Yeah, I think, when I think of branding a city, I think of a few things, right? So is it a place where it is travel experience? Like if you're choosing to go anywhere in the world and you only had one place to go, what's on the table? Like, so you think of like, okay, the experience, right? So Hawaii, right? Everybody loves Hawaii. It's digressed because of recent, like, Lahaina and all those things. Yeah. Like when you think of like, okay.
Or all the stuff that happened during the time.
Yeah. So like those things affect the, we call brand affinity of a city, right? The brand affinity is how the response audiences have of saying, hey, I want to book a trip there. So if you increase the brand awareness or brand affinity of a place to be like, I could see myself experiencing that. That's why using influencers and influential marketing for travel agents is like a huge thing that they need to be doing, because you have people that are trusted.
That's right, Nashville. You should be using us.
And this is not just saying that to say it. It's saying that because it works. Is that if you have people that have trusted audiences. So back then, the way a city would market was like, here's one set of ice cream, eat it.
Yeah.
And you're going to like it.
Yeah.
Right. Today's world is, hey, what do you want? What kind of toppings? What kind of, we have this one that's using goat milk. We have,
is it rolled or is it coned?
Right. Is it rolled? There's so many different options. So what you need to do as a city, if you got cities listening right now, is like, what are your ice cream? Like, what is your type of delivery? Like, and find the micro influencers or just those influencers that have a voice and have an audience that could showcase and demonstrate the experience that people can have through the lens of their favorite person that they follow. Right. So like those showcasing those experiences, like, oh, okay. Like when you think of the largest e-commerce brand online, what do you think of?
Amazon or Walmart.
Amazon.
Okay. Or Walmart, yeah.
Amazon or Walmart.
Or Temu.
But how much of Amazon affects your buying decision based on a review?
It depends on what the item and topic is. If it's, I'm going to a clothing store and then I look at the Amazon price, even if it's $2 cheaper, I'm going to buy it based on the purchasing price.
Sure, but would you buy it on purchasing price if it had like 2 stars?
I have bought 2-star products.
Oh my gosh, dude. You're high risk, low reward.
But the 2-star products I've bought have been like, I needed this for this. I didn't want to pay the premium to have that type of tool, and it worked for what I needed.
There you go. Yeah.
And so like on the consumption side of things, like this company of shirts I'm wearing, it's a Hawaiian company called Hard Daddy.
Okay.
All of their fulfillment comes from China, just like everyone else. Right. But they don't sell on Amazon. And so,
So you pay a premium.
Well, I pay a premium to go to their website to buy them because they don't sell the product on.
So if you
Amazon.
if you're a city, right, and you don't have a premium or a premium experience, people are going to go to the Temu version of your city,
of course,
because it's accessible. So like the thing is like understanding your audience and building a message around that. Of like, hey, would you go to Amazon and buy this 2-star product? Well, sure, if I just need something because it's like you are a commodity and I just need something and I don't care about the reviews. Yeah. Or if you're looking for a quality premium shirt that you can't get anywhere else, you're not going to look at Amazon. You're like, I will go directly to the site and purchase it because I can't find this anywhere else. Is that the kind of city or experience that you want to build? Right. And if the answer is yes, then you got to start thinking strategically about your approach to marketing.
So with all of that in mind, what were, when you did the rebranding, let's walk through your story of rebranding Vegas.
Yeah.
How did you get to that role? What happened? And then after that, we'll talk about successes and failures.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll just do the nutshell story of getting offered this position as a content creator. and strategist for Las Vegas. So I was living in Long Beach with my wife, and we've already built companies. We've already done those things. So I had like already a name in the industry, so as a content director and all that stuff. So I had actual friends in Vegas. This is my second time living in Vegas. The first time was back in 2012, 13. That's where I met Sean and all my other friends. I was there for a couple of years and moved back to California. But I had some friends already that knew my work and already knew what I did. And there was an opening, a few positions that were being opened for the agency that ran Las Vegas. So the agency is called R&R Partners, and they came up with the campaign What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas in 2001. And they're the ones that started the LVCVA, which is Las Vegas Visitors and Conventions Authority, right? Las Vegas Visitors Authority and Convention Center. So they started that, and then that was like back, man, I don't know when, the 50s or 60s, right?
Yeah.
And then when they're hiring for this position, they had a lot of applicants and all that stuff. But I knew like 3 or 4 people that were like, hey, I know a guy that's perfect for this position. So like they applied for me basically. And I got a call and was like, come to Vegas, check it out. So I went over there. I did like a whole tour. They made me an offer. In like 2 weeks, we moved my family there. I took the offer and I was like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. Working for a large agency. There's over like 400 employees in this agency advertising. They've made so many ads, so many trophies, so many awards for these award-winning ads. So I got to see under the hood of what it took to build this type of creative agency and how it works. And my job really from 2018 to 2020 is to re-identify, like reimagine what Vegas could look like. Because before that,
because this is coming back to the life cycle. So it's a new life cycle.
Yeah. So they're celebrating 20 years. Right? Yep. So of the original brand, but we're wondering like on social media we could do better, because what they were just showing on Instagram alone. So let's isolate their Instagram. What they were showing alone was like pictures of Bellagio, pictures of Paris,
which is boring. Like that's not,
so boring.
There's no storytelling. There's
right.
No, yeah.
So like I came in and I was thinking to myself like, what are people coming here for? Like what's the audience? Like what? And I had access to all the data now of why people are coming to Vegas, right? So I align that with like, okay, what if we just created and treated these social channels like their own TV network? Like what kind of shows would we showcase? Because the disconnect here is people don't care.
I don't care.
There's no one that they could attach themselves to. There's no message that's really resonating. And as the culture was evolving, because this is when like, social media and all this stuff, people are actually spending more time during, especially COVID, we found out that digital social media was actually a place that people went to hang out and spend time in. So the whole concept was like, well, no one's showing their faces and there's no reason to come back or hang out because no one expects. So like, imagine if your favorite TV show just stopped airing 1 week and they didn't tell you. You'd be so mad. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I was preparing my, right now I'm going, the last episode of Skeleton Crew Star Wars is showing tonight. And I've been keeping up every week. I'm a big Star Wars geek. And
is it good?
It's actually really good.
Is it like is it like their others?
No, it's not like Alkali. I hated that one.
I didn't watch it because of the politics.
It was garbage.
Yeah.
Don't watch it.
The other one,
Skeleton Crew is good. Yeah. Okay. Watch it.
What's the other one that came out a couple of years ago?
Mandalorian's
I've enjoyed the Mandalorian.
I love Mandalorian. Yeah. I don't like Boba Fett.
Boba Fett was okay.
It was Mandalorian 2.0.
Exactly.
3.0.
Yeah.
But the idea here in concept was like, all right, well, I'm going to come up with these we call content buckets. I'm going to treat this social platform as like its own network. And if I could imagine what shows to live on this network, what would it be? So I created the concepts. What happens at what's called How to Do Vegas over the weekend, How to Do Vegas. So it was like How to Vegas. And then the other one was Latest in Vegas, like showcasing the latest attractions, to the city, like shows, bars, restaurants. So we created like these different buckets or verticals of if I treated this like a show, this is the branding package that it would have. So each show got its own branding package and its own template to demonstrate or take the content and present the content.
Okay.
Right? So
that each of those verticals have separate hosts that you guys brought in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we would either bring in or we would use so for Latest in Vegas, for instance, we use the owner of the bar or restaurant or whoever the contact person is. If it was like, we did one with, a new show that was, in Vegas, and we used the characters of the show and we filmed them and they kind of like were the hosts.
Okay, great.
So we would use the hosts that are directly connected to the whatever we're showcasing as the subject matter expert.
Okay.
And then that actually outperformed all the third party, of course, stuff that we were building or working with. Like we did one with like Tastemade and our content organically was outperforming our third party content. And it's because people resonated with it. Right. So like they understood because they started connecting to people instead of like objects or things. And then that took the social media platforms significantly from 100,000 to hundreds of thousands of followers and shareability. I think that was like the curiosity of it is like Vegas is producing this. This is crazy. Yeah. Like this is awesome. So that was really cool to understand, for a city that's kind of like known for one thing. Like how can you outbrand Vegas?
The only Paris is just the history of Paris. The Tokyo is outbranding Vegas, but Tokyo is a very large scale. Yeah. Millions upon millions of people live there.
I would recommend for a city to quadruple down on the most unique value propositions that it has, or why do people actually visit? Why do they care? Can they, and why are people like for Nashville, largest move in history? Like so many people have moved into, I think the GDP of Nashville is insane in the past 2 years.
Yeah, the GDP has increased by millions or billions. Right. The GDP of the state of Tennessee, if I remember correctly, is $68 billion, I believe, for the state.
It's crazy.
And so, since we're talking about the state, have you looked at state branding packages at all? No. Since you were in a DMO marketing for cities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny enough, I have not.
Okay. So from a state branding package, I've looked at a couple.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee is doing an extraordinary job as a state level.
Okay.
There's some other, like Wyoming's doing really well from a state level of branding. Idaho's doing really well. Florida's doing fantastic.
Yeah.
But like these pinnacle states of like New York and Pennsylvania, they are not doing well on the branding packages.
Yeah.
Get into the state, like research that for a little bit. I think it'd be a fascinating conversation. But let's go to back to Vegas.
Yeah.
So it was what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And then you guys rebranded it with another tagline.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like? What was like? And then what was that tagline?
Yeah. So I had also the creative department for Vegas. We've had a lot of different creative directors, and we're all just pitching ideas. Like, so you typically want to work on like a campaign like 2-3 years before you launch. So the whole concept was let's get some minds together. Let's put some slide decks together and present some ideas. So I had like 3 or 4 different ideas, and I remember one of them, like I filmed within 24 hours, we filmed like a promo for it just to put it in the pitch deck I like to go above and beyond and be like, because a lot of people just can't imagine unless they actually see it. So, one campaign was called like Pursue Vegas. Another one was Come and Stay, Play, whatever. And then the other one was the rebrand, What Happens in Vegas. So we just changed one word, and the word was instead of like, before we get to that, the problem with the original brand campaign, was that it was very promiscuous and it was adult permission. And actually they launched it at a time where Circus was like blowing up. Mm-hmm. It was becoming more family orientated. So like 70% of Vegas hotel properties liked it. They thought it was provocative, but the rest were like, this is not what we want to represent Vegas. Like, it's just like adult permission. It's kind of like just, it's like the Wild West. So, when we took a look at what resonated or how can we win all these hotel properties? Like, if we were to do a rebrand, like, what would that look like? And how do we also kind of like give a nod to the past and kind of like prepare for the future, which I thought it was very brilliant when we placed it and said, you know what, let's keep this, but let's change a word. So we changed it from what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas to what happens in Vegas only happens in Vegas, referring to this idea of you can only get a Vegas experience in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we changed it to. And 100% of the hotel properties was all in.
Okay.
When we pitched the idea, we put the presentation deck together. They were like, I love it. Let's run it. So we started building it out and ran it in 2020.
And then you had an interesting thing that happened. The day you guys were on to launch the campaign, Kobe died.
That morning, it was Sunday.
Yeah.
That morning, I was in the command center at Cosmo. We're ready to launch this huge campaign. We're going to turn every single board and digital everything. We were going to light up the whole city. We had all our content creators. We hired drone experts. We had all of it. And that morning, we turn on the news and it's Kobe. He had gotten a helicopter crash, and we had to make a decision. And I remember being in the command center and be like, we can't do this. Like, we can't go live. Like, we can't launch a campaign, successfully at least. It would be so, like, out of tune. It would be so, like, tone deaf.
Yeah.
So we had to make a decision within 2 hours. And within those 2 hours, a couple hours that were in there, we said, hey, we're going to shut it down. And we're going to now use our time or our marketing spend on paying respect to Kobe and his family. So what we did that same day, within hours, is had all our creative teams create and design every board, billboard, digital board.
Which is insane to think about the turnaround, like the asset turnaround and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's crazy to say, rest in peace, Kobe, we love you, LA. Like, it was our most traveled, other than like, the travel that comes into Vegas, like our drive travel, right? Our local travel is important to us.
Yep.
So just from a business perspective of like, hey, that's our sister city, like let's just come around and really support and show our respect, not only to the city, but to a legend.
Yep.
So we did that, and, it was really successful. And then weeks later, we launched the campaign and it did really well. We spent literally millions. We did.
But because of that, you probably had a lot of people be like, oh, Vegas did this.
What it showed, funny enough, was the leadership of a city. So the reason why I think we learned from that, or we did that, or we made that decision, is because we learned from 1 October, the shooting that happened just years prior.
Yeah.
And what we learned is a city that cares can lead well. So we just decided as a city that, hey, if something happens, we're going to say something.
Yep.
And we're going to do something, and we're going to respond and not react. But we want to get ahead of it. And so I was just very grateful to watch that type of leadership play out during these times, those moments. They did the same thing. So like we launched the campaign, and what happened a month later, like that same month, COVID hit, and we're like, all right, what are we going to do? So we did a whole, we had a plan for the whole entire year to push this campaign.
Okay.
Now we had to push and flip the script and kind of like protect. And we had to do like a whole mass campaign and all kinds of stuff. It was insane because we didn't know what was going to happen. We had 14 days to change the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And we were just like, all right, well, here we go. And that's when I felt in my heart, I'm like, I think, my time is coming to a close at this agency.
Yeah.
Just because it just wasn't, I came back to a different world after having my first kid during COVID. Like the day our city shut down was March 17th.
Yep. It
was St. Patty's Day.
Yep.
I know that because I was in the hospital and my wife was giving birth to our first kid. And I was the last dad. I was the last parent before they changed the policy of no parents, like no dad.
My wife and I just had our first baby, and if I wasn't in that room, I would be livid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Baby.
I would have probably done some stupid things.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all that in mind, now let's get more into like personal branding.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, and you've worked with a lot of people. Before we get to that, successes and failures of working with an agency, rebranding a city. What was like a major success? What was a major failure?
Yeah, I think major success was the buy-in we got from the community. That was a huge success. I was nervous. I picked it apart, in the beginning. You'd be like, really? Like, this is what we're gonna... Okay, I wanted to pursue Vegas. I thought this was the coolest idea, but I was like, all right, we'll do it. All right. And then we got all the buy-in. We saw the community come around it, and we're like, all right, cool. Like, and it didn't harm the first campaign. Like, it didn't damage it. Yep. And in fact, it like supported it almost, and the failure that I saw too is, how long it took to make decisions through the executive level. Like pushing things, like just like the concept started with this idea that was just killer. And then it goes through like so many layers and processes of executive input from multiple like kitchens, telling like the creative work where to go and what to do. And those decisions that were made, like completely watered down the original purpose, or and you could see those things and you're like, gosh, it could have been better, but it's still a success. But man, if you were just there in the room for that original idea and then someone had to chime in because of some reason, because we were saying something enough or doing, it was just like all these executive level decisions that were made. Some things were like killed, we're like, oh, that would have done really well, But I learned a lot from that, just like, all right, some of the failures is like, it's too many cooks in the kitchen. Especially when you rebrand a whole entire city. Like everybody wants to be in charge of that and involved in that, and put their input because they want to feel like they're a part of it.
Interesting. Yeah. It's we're kind of in that space, not in the rebranding of a city, but we've worked with a lot of metropolitans, and you see a lot of inner workings. You're like, you guys could be doing better here, but you're not paying me. You're not paying me for it, so I'm not going to give you that advice.
Yeah. What I don't like is like there's a lot of politics.
There is a lot of politics,
and it's because of like an inflated ego, or like it's due to something that's so minute and small, and it's like really, like it's so petty and childish that you're just like, I don't even want to deal with it.
So we'll get to the personal brand topic. Yeah. So you moved here 2022, right?
21.
Okay. Moved here in 21 to Hendersonville. You got involved in the leadership. You started your own business called Executive Brand Growth.
Yeah.
And you've had some good successes and you've had some good failures.
Yeah. Great failures.
Yeah. With starting your own business, first off, what was Executive Brand Growth? And what were some successes and what were some failures with starting your business?
Yeah, great questions. Originally, I felt that I wanted to go back into business after owning a few businesses in my 20s. Like I'm 37 now, and I just felt God like saying, "Hey, it's time to restart something." And I was like, well, God, what am I going to start? Am I going to start like an e-commerce, or what am I going to do? Like I didn't have a concept or idea. And he's like, well, funny enough, like I'm going to utilize something that I've been working you through for your whole entire career. So 21 years, ever since I started building MySpace pages for bands and people, like I was literally coding MySpace pages and design work when I was like in high school. He's like, I'm going to utilize everything that I've taught you, even going through art school, in film school for 6 years, and all the things that you've been building, YouTube channels and all that stuff. I'm going to utilize that. And you're going to create this business that's going to actually serve, impact driven leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs and just people that have a voice in industries. And you're going to help really serve them in a way where they could amplify their message and create more impact, more influence, and generate more revenue to their mission that they have. And, and the name came to me, just because like highly influenced by, my late father-in-law. He was an executive, a CTO of a global company, and working with him for the past 5 years and building his personal brand within the company demonstrated to me that leadership voices matter, and they need to find a way to communicate that always and often.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, oh, this is simple. I'm just going to call it executive brand growth, and we're going to grow the brands of executive leaders. So if you're a CEO or you're a keynote speaker, whatever it is, if you run a company, well, there's a reason why you ran it, and you have a voice and you have a message and you have a leadership skill, because you got to build a company with people. That's why they call it a company, because you're in company with people. So that's what we started off as, is building these executive level personal brands that can influence industries and create create a message that stands out, that separates them. Like, you won't have an Elon Musk without his voice, right?
Yeah,
You won't have Tesla without Elon.
Yeah.
And same thing goes for all these people. So I learned, I'm like, okay, with every brand, there's a founder. With every brand, there's a voice of why it started. Like, I just want to help them tell it often. Mm-hmm. And then the lessons that I've learned is that it takes a lot to do that. And there's ways, to build that company. It's just, I knew I couldn't do it myself. Even though I really, really wanted to, because I was really great at all the things, all the different hats. And I've learned how to build departments through my years of experience, having to do that for the companies that I owned in the past with partners, and having to do that in the agency world. I understood that there, especially in marketing and branding, that's huge, that there is a creative anatomy component to it. Yeah. Understanding like, hey, it's built like a body. So if there's no leadership in the top, there's no direction, no vision, and the creative work actually doesn't matter or ever gets executed the way you want it to, because there's no direction.
Yeah.
So learning to build it, I was literally like building a plane as we fell. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, these are the components that I need. And then it's all theory until you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I know I need this project manager. I know I need this editor. I know I need this, but like, hiring people in the States is so expensive. They want more. And like, you can't manage a lot of them, because if they are good talent, they want to get paid more. But if they're just, if they're freelancing, they want their own time. So like, you have to like really manage well. You got to learn creatives in their language and understand that every creative is made different. So when I talk about creatives, I mean like shredder, which is a shooter editor, content editor, a videographer, designer, whoever, like these things every company needs to function and get the message out there.
Yeah.
So I've had to learn how to manage and set expectations and lead creatives and understand how every role is really a key element to the whole picture. So typically a business would hire one creative and be like, I think
you do everything.
Media manager. And then you start putting hats on them.
Yeah.
Well, we need video. Well, we need graphics. Well, we need a social, engagement. So you start putting all this stuff. It's almost like a ministry, like a church ministry. That's bringing on an intern to do like 70 jobs.
Yep.
And, you get sent to the office because you're failing, So like learning that was a huge learning curve in business. As how do you manage creatives, but also like a part of what we do is we recruit creatives in companies because we knew that it would be better not to outsource it to an agency, the work, but to install creatives in your business so that they understand the ethos and ecosystem of the company so that they could best demonstrate and do the work. So instead of saying like, hey, we want to take on, work, and it's like, all right, but there's a lot of misalignment that we lost in the, and then there's friction within the brand because, it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Like every business isn't like every business. So instead, like we got to spend more time with the founder. We got to spend more time with, understanding how the business functions and then execute. So I was like, well, let's just recruit creatives in these businesses that they could actually be in charge of and manage. And so that's a part of the direction that we're going in the future is helping develop creative teams, helping recruit creatives onshore, offshore. Just depends on the outcomes, but also tying that to strategy of building the personal brands of these executives and also eventually just the company in general.
What's been your biggest failure with starting your own thing?
Imposter syndrome.
Go deeper with that.
Yeah. So
were you comparing yourself to friends in Vegas? Were you?
I think there's like a mix of a lot. So like, having the confidence of building something, like with the creative part, like I was very confident. Like I've done creative my whole life. I have a degree in that, you know. But to paint vision and to keep people motivated and to, you know, be the sole person to drive sales and keep the business going, the funding of, like, you know, we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this company and haven't gotten paid back towards that, but growing that brand. And then, you know, having people come in and out, you know, lots of creatives come in and out. I failed a lot at management and, you know, vision and setting expectations and communication, like all those things, you know, and I've learned a lot from it, through failure. Like I've failed in creative my whole life. So I'm not afraid of that, but the imposter syndrome was like, I should be further than I am now. I think that's the feeling that a lot of people get. I should be further along. And then you start asking yourself, like, why am I not? All right. So you feel like, all right, well, it's probably because this or that, or, you know, lack of focus or lack of this, or maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So you start getting in your head.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I've struggled with running our thing with XPLR.NASH. But the realization that I've come to is that it wasn't my time.
Right. Ultimately, right? Yes. Ultimately, because here's the thing, whether you're a believer or not, like I remember one time Tyler Perry, he's the creator of Medea. Yeah. Right. He had said magazines and newspapers would not put this out there. And every time I do an interview, when they ask me what's the key to success, they always take it out. And if you don't know this about Tyler Perry, like he's put on and spent so much money putting on plays and performances that got 3 people to show up.
Yeah.
And over, he's failed for years. But when Medea popped off, it was, and he said this, he's like, it's because of God's timing. And ultimately saying that it's because God's timing of how it went down, he couldn't manufacture. Right. So like for guys like you and me, God's timing is everything. When I look at, you know, stories in the Bible, when I look at Daniel, I'm like 40 years, like Moses, 40 years, like I'm like
Abraham, man, like Abraham, having a child at 100.
Exactly. And I think that the common belief is like, you know, go viral, you know, and the common belief is like, oh, if I just make one video or make this, whatever, I'm going to blow up and my bills are taken care of. And in fact, like that's not the case.
Even if you look at like the bigger creator, Sean, like he's been at it since 2012.
Yeah, dude.
Casey Neistat, like
over 10,000.
Peter McKinnon, like these Mr. Beast, they've been at it for a decade or longer.
Yeah, overnight success happens in like 12 years, 20 years.
Yeah, it's probably 13 years, 13.5.
Yeah, that's how I feel. It's been 21 years for me. Yeah.
What, with all of this in mind, and like what you're doing within the future and stuff, how could somebody build a brand now, especially if this episode's not coming out for a couple weeks, but like put a marker there, Yoshi. Let's just say hypothetically TikTok's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so how can people build a brand now with proof of social media, but then also without social media?
Yeah. So number one that I think of is like you already are building a brand, right? It's your personal. So if you look at your thumbprint,
it's personal.
Stare at it, and you ask yourself, like, or you understand that nobody else on this planet out of 8 billion people have that thumbprint. That means that you've been personally designed to do work, right? So like you already own a brand, or you already have a brand. You have to own it, and so what people say about you, your reputation, like who is talking about you, number one, what stories are they saying? And if no one is, it's probably because you haven't done anything. So like the idea here, if you're going to build something, build. So instead of saying like, well, I want these outcomes, I want to blow this up, I want to make this one video, instead of doing that, like test, learn, adapt, build in public, start building something. Like, what are you passionate about? What are you mad about? What grinds your gears? What are the things that, because that's the thing to start leaning in on and be like, hey, like, this is what I hate about this. I'm going to start building something to protect this or do something like this. Or, you know, what's the thing that wakes you up every morning and be like, I could do this for the rest of my life. Like me talking about content creation or strategy or positioning or branding, all that stuff, I could literally do that in my sleep. I could wake up at 4 a.m. and you could ask me questions. I'll be like, yeah, this formula, like just use this strategy or whatever. And I could give a good, concise, a strategy around it because it's what I live for, but if you're going to build today without even social media, you got to ask yourself, well, what is your mission? Like, you got to get the foundation right. So like, if you're going to build a powerful personal brand, like just take it as, a skyscraper. Like we look downtown, you look at the Batman building in Nashville and stuff, but you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a big building. So gorgeous, the architecture and all that stuff. But you got to look and be like, before they got there, they needed to build the foundation. They needed to have a blueprint. They needed to understand that they were building something. So you got to decide, are you going to build a brand or are you going to just keep going and doing the same stuff over again? So in that, you got to understand that if you're going to build a powerful brand, you need to start with a foundation. Like, what is your purpose? What is your vision, mission, and what values do you carry to keep yourself intact throughout the journey? So those three things the top three are completely different from one another, right? Purpose is, what do you feel like you've been designed to do on this earth while you're alive? Like, what do you truly feel that you were designed to do, right? That you wake up and you're like, I'm designed to do this, right? That's your purpose. Your vision is, well, what do you want to see happen in the next year? What do you want to see happen in the next 5 years? So what's something that's bothering you that you want to see change, right? That's vision. Mission is, all right, well, how are you going to participate in that change? What's the assignment that you're going to build? Like, what are you going to do? Right? Is it going out there and showcasing different restaurants and places in Nashville for 3 years consistently over time? And that's the game plan, and you build something and gain traction. If that's the plan, that's the mission, right? You want to bring more travel to Nashville and showcase how wonderful this place is. That's the vision. So people can travel here and see how and connect with the city. That's the vision. The mission is like, all right, well, show people. Right? And then the values is like, well, what are we going to commit to and say no to on the journey to keep us intact throughout the whole process?
I think that's something that Aaron and I, Aaron is still involved with the company. He's not, yes, he is not gone. He's still here. So, if you guys miss Aaron, make sure to send him a DM. It's Aaron Pennington _ and say hello. But that's one thing that we've learned really hard this year is there was a lot of these really nice keychains that were being dangled in front of us. Oh, we can partner with you. We can do these things. We can do these things. And at the end of the day, those shiny objects, those shiny partnerships, those brand deals, they didn't really fit our mission. And our mission is to create actionable content to allow people to experience their local communities.
Yeah.
Everything we do comes through that funnel.
Yeah.
And the reason we do podcasting is so people can learn about local people that are influential in this community.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of opportunities, and he's like, oh, here's these keychains. Here you go. Yeah. Oh, do this flip for me, doggy. Do this flip for me. And it is a distraction. Yeah. And we learned hard, and we learned through failure.
Yeah.
And we learned through, okay, like this was a waste of time. Let's not waste our time.
Yeah.
Like, let's make sure that our time is guarded, that we have time to see our families grow and thrive, because that's the biggest priority.
Yeah.
And then build this thing. And so it's just that's been a fun journey, and we've failed a lot, and I think we've failed upward,
of course. Yeah.
And I think we're on as a business and where we're at and where we were, we're in a really good position. But it's that's a great piece of advice for if you're going to build something, is how strong is your foundation?
Absolutely. And because if your foundation isn't strong, like you said, there will be distractions that come along the way to deter you from the mission that you're on.
Yeah.
And they could be masked or cloaked as opportunities. But if you don't have vision and clarity on your purpose and mission, it's going to be very challenging to want to say yes to everything instead of saying, no, let me remind you what the mission is, that just doesn't fit where we're going. So the people that build that powerful brand get there faster if they could really harness those foundational things and apply those things to the decisions that they make throughout their business career, you know, especially in personal branding. As a personal brand, like, what are your values? What do you value most? What makes you stand out? Right. And are you, you know, like, what do you talk about? Like, what do you care about the most? And how do you, you know, express that? What vehicles, like, social media is just a tool.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, social media is just a platform, a tool. Like, something else is if TikTok goes away tomorrow, something else will replace it.
Yes.
Right. So that doesn't change. The behavior that you have towards social media needs to change. Like, the way you see social media needs to change, because everything that you have is not going to change. Like, you're not going to change. Like, your purpose, your mission, your values, even though the platforms change. The platforms are a vehicle to express that. But if you have no clear identity, clear understanding of why you exist and your mission, this stuff really doesn't matter, right? The paint on the house doesn't matter.
And I think your personal story can relate to that.
Yeah.
For a while, you didn't know what your identity was and who you were. And so, let's talk about your story. And you don't have to go deep into the weeds with it, but like, you found out later in life that you were adopted, and that wrecked you.
Yeah.
And talk about how that wrecked you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, if you're living your life and you kind of like have been told that one story your whole life, and then something comes out of the blue and kind of like crashes against that belief, then everything you believe is questioned. All right. So, like, I found out I was adopted when I was 8. You know, I got kids. I got a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm like, they are intuitive. Like, you know, they know stuff.
Oh yeah.
Right. Imagine if
I've been watching them on YouTube.
Yeah. If you're 8 years old, you know, you kind of have like starting to understand.
Yeah.
You know, so I was 8 years old, and I found out from a family member that, you know, that I was adopted. And I was like, first of all, what's that mean? Second of all, like, what do you mean? Like, my parents are my parents. Like, what I've known about my parents or the time, like, is like, oh yeah, I was, you know, I'm theirs. That wrecked me visibly towards becoming a teenager. Mm-hmm. And internally I was processing that, and it took years to be like, you know, and it's, if you're listening, you're probably like, well, what did you just ask your parents? And, you know, so I did, but I come from like a Asian background. Yeah, so I'm Filipino. My parents are Filipino. So the culture really, in the Filipino, culture is a lot different than the Western culture. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it has to be like, hey, just stay quiet. Like, don't disrupt any, like, don't stand out. Whatever you do, just get in line and, you know, take the route of, you know, becoming a nurse or a mailman, and you'll be fine. You know, like, don't disrupt what good is happening. You know what I mean? Like, just stay quiet and get in your lane. For me, like, that was very challenging as I was growing up, because I was like, well, I don't even belong here. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to be here, I'm like, I am a disruption, you know, to people's lives, to you know, I just saw myself as like a mistake, because I never got the feedback of like, hey, where did I come from? Who's my real family? You know? So those were the challenging things. And I think I had like a lot of identity crisis of like value perception too. So like in a way, like creativity actually like saved my life, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s as a kid. You know, we adopted social media, we adopted the internet, and that gave so much opportunities for growth and creativity. Like, I started learning, you know, photography and Photoshop and film and all that stuff, because my dad, he was a Vietnam vet. So he came here to America and he was taking pictures all the time. And we had shoeboxes and shoeboxes of Kodak films, unprocessed, you know, and just like, or processed films too. And I was introduced to that world at an early age. I think I had a camera in my hand ever since I could walk. You know, my first words were content. And
your first words were content.
I was like, content,
content, mama.
Content, gotta make content.
Content, mama. Not milk.
No.
Not mama. Content.
Serve me up some content. And, but also coming from LA and such a really saturated kind of creative culture where we had skateboarding, punk rock, and hip hop, and that's what kind of raised me. And I also had, a foot in church. My parents were deacons growing up, and they became pastors. So understanding like, service to the community, there's creativity. I was introduced to music through worship and understanding that world. So like, I was like, I want to be on stage. I want to be on the platform. I want to do this. And like my ambition for that led me to find purpose in creativity. And like, cause with creativity, what it taught me as a teen, it was like, I could think of something and I could create it, and I could create something that never existed.
Yeah.
And I could present it.
Yeah.
And it could make you feel something. That's why I went to film school, and I was like, if I'm going to be here on earth, like there has to be a purpose or reason. I'm going to figure that out. And in my teen years, I was really struggling with that concept of like, literally, I'm not supposed to be here. So like, does the stuff I do here actually even matter?
Mm-hmm.
And I was wrestling.
Do you think that mindset still affects how you approach life and business and relationships today?
To a degree, I think. But here's what I love is I could use that lens and also put on the lens of redemption.
Yeah.
Right. So redeemed person that struggled with depression and anxiety. And I might still carry those things like anxiety and stress, but I'm using it. Now I get to see life through the lens of as a gift, like life is a gift.
Yeah.
And redemption, giving my life completely over to Jesus at 18 and saying, hey man, I don't know what this life means. And I attempted suicide 3 times at 15 and 16. And like, I'm a survivor of that, and understanding like, life is truly a gift and this is my purpose.
Which if you look at statistical data, the highest attempted suicide rates are with adopted kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very grateful and aware now. And I'm like, all right, whatever I do in business or whatever, if there's any impact that is made, whether it's through my story or through something I create or through an ad or through whatever, I don't want to take it lightly that I got a chance to be in front of an audience or have, because ultimately you're in front of an audience of one. And
yes.
Like when it's your time, when you take your last breath, you're going to show up. He's going to ask like, hey, what'd you do with the gift of life that I give you? And if you're like, dude, well, this person told me I should have been a nurse, or this person told me I should have been a this, and he's like, well, what did I call you to do? What did I design you for? And you gotta sit with that. And I think that's the way I look through life now, through that lens of I've been redeemed from my past, and I've been redeemed from just the fear of failure. Like I don't have a fear of failing no more, right? Like after you've done it.
Failure for me is, how can I learn from this? How can I operate from a better place?
Mm-hmm.
How can I be a better man?
Yeah.
In a sense, failure is a good thing.
Yeah.
I define failure and sinning in different categories. Because there's failures in your everyday operations as a business. There's failures in conversations and relationships. There's this, and then there's sin, and they're 2 separate categories.
Yeah. Failure is like a measurement of success. Like, okay, I didn't hit the mark, so I failed. Right.
Yeah.
And sin is like, I definitely didn't hit the mark. I got to repent and go a different direction.
Yes.
Right. Same thing goes with failure. Like you're measuring how successful your day is. And if you don't, send those emails out, or you don't hit these KPIs, then do you technically failed by setting up that measurement of success? Right.
I think it's to each individual's interpretation.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Like, in business and like in life, like you have a measurement of failure. And the thing is like the people that haven't failed have never really tried, because if especially as a business owner, you're going to fail. You're going to set up a measurement of success that you don't even come close to.
Yep.
Right?
All the time.
All the time. It's almost like, well, how much did we make this month? How much did we make this year? I'm nowhere near the number I pitched or like I was hoping to hit. And then you look and you test, learn, adapt, and you readjust your strategies. And you're like, all right, well, if we implement X, Y, and Z, our hypothesis should end us up here. And if we don't, let's readjust and figure out why. Right. So failure is a key element to growth.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right? If you're not failing, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're not changing things up, you're not reassessing, you're not reshaping your strategy. Like the people that don't fail, they just do the same thing over and over again, and they're compromised. Like they're complacent.
Yeah.
They're just like, I'm just doing this and that's it.
Back to your adoption story.
Yeah.
My mentor, he adopted 2 boys, and now there's severe separation in their relationships.
Yeah.
What piece of advice would you give to the adoptees and then to the parents that adopt them?
Yeah, that's great. As an adoptee, I loved my parents. They were great examples. I respect them. Till this day, I love who they are, and I love how they raised me. They gave me so many tools to navigate through life. But that also didn't mean that I wasn't, the best, as a child, as a kid, because I just felt like someone owed me something. Right. So number one, if you're an adoptee, no one owes you anything. Okay. Have a sense of gratitude, for life. Maybe you might not see it as a gift. You might see it as a curse right now. Some kids look through life as they're cursed.
Yep.
They think that it's their fault for a lot of things, or someone owes them something, some sort of privilege, So number one, I think you need to first have a relationship with God, your ultimate creator. If you don't, then you can't fit the rest of these pieces together. Because being adopted, I understood when I read through Romans, I read through the Gospels.
You understand what that means, what Paul was saying to a Roman audience.
Right? Yeah. Romans says that we are all adopted into God's kingdom, and we've all inherited the kingdom of God through one man.
Yep.
Right? That man's Jesus Christ.
And if we get deeper into it, we're grafted in into the body of Israel.
Yes.
Now you're getting into theological topics that are very psychological.
When God sees us, because of the adoption story, he doesn't see our faults. He sees his son.
Yes.
He sees his blood on us, and he accepts us. And it's a choice. And what I learned about being adopted is that my parents chose to love me every day. And they decided if I was like my kids, my wife gave birth to our kids, they're ours. They didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, as a dad, I have to choose. I'm like, I'm going to love these kids. I'm going to rear my child. I'm going to, raise them up right as men, godly men. I had to choose that. But at being adopted, my parents had to choose me every day and say, they're not my own, but I will take them in as my own and raise them upright. And I had to understand that and process that. And when I think about that, I have a heart full of gratitude for the sacrifices they've made in order for me to live and be brought in a home that was very loving and supportive in any creative endeavors. Playing loud music in 2 a.m. I think of all those things. I'm like, you endured that because of me? And when I didn't listen, when I didn't choose the career you wanted me to go, you still had grace for me. Wow. The other side to it as a parent is be as transparent as possible. Right? Be honest. The one thing I wish I that could change is the honesty part. My parents, when I was 8 and growing up, because we come from a Filipino family, they're when I asked about my parents, they would say, hey, we're not ready to tell you until you graduate college or until you, because we don't want you to run away from home. So the fear of leaving or being, I understand it, as any parent would. Okay, I have to make a decision. They made a decision that was best, that they thought was best for my good. and they were hoping that it would be okay. But, some parents aren't perfect, right? But if you are a parent and you have adopted kids, be as transparent. From an adoptee standpoint, like, I became a youth leader when I gave my life to Jesus at 18 because I didn't want another student or young man to go through the identity crisis that I went through, or the depression, or the anxiety, or the stress, or all that stuff. And
or the attempted suicides. Yeah.
Right. If I could use my story to help another young man go through that and wrestle with that in an open and safe place, like, I'll want to do that. That's why I became a youth leader at the time. And the same goes for any parent. I'm like, hey, if you want to do your kids a favor, do not create friction to make them feel like you're lying to them, or giving them a reason for them to not trust you completely. Right? Be honest and upfront, even if you're afraid of what that will do. But if you're not honest and you're saying, hey, this is the reason, this is why we chose to adopt you. Like, yes, you're adopted, but I love you as my own. That's what adoption means, is that you have the inheritance. You're adopted. You are mine, and I'm going to raise you as so. And I'm going to treat you that way because that's how it is. Because I'm choosing to love you just like God loves us. He's choosing to love us as an adopted father, right? So those would just be my tips for them, as an adoptee. Pursue God, understand why you were designed for, like, understand you have to have a relationship, or else this doesn't mean anything. There's no purpose in this. Like, you're a whoops or a mistake. And the enemy is going to come and remind you that every day of, like, well, what does it really matter? Right? You're not supposed to be here anyways. They could have just left you. Your parents are crack addicts, or like, I used to think that. I used to think, like, okay, I would just make up a story in my head about my real parents or where I come from because no one told me the truth. So I was like, I'm either like a crack son or a crack baby, or, my parents are from Krypton and I'm
you're a superhero.
When I turn 18 or when I'm of age, I'm going to start activating my superpower, because I used to read a lot of comic books, because so those are the things, and as a parent, just be transparent.
Yeah. That's a good parenting tip.
Yeah.
I probably need to hear it every day. Yeah. We'll wrap it up with, you have introduced me to two really good restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
You introduced me to Maemax, which is this hidden gem Filipino place that was truly one of my favorite places that we filmed at in 2024. That was just a fun day, a great experience, freaking fantastic.
We did karaoke.
And then you also introduced me to Café Rakka. And the hot sauce, the shawarma, everything. It's amazing. So, do you have any other hidden gem Nashville restaurants that I need to go to, that we need to feature on XPLR.NASH? We need to get you in and film. If not, just describe an experience at Maemax. So something you could talk to learn about.
Man, I feel like you're the expert in the hidden gems, man. Like, there's not much I could share with you. Right?
Hey, those two hidden gems, man, they slapped.
Dude, there's this one place in Assembly Hall. I don't know if you've been to it. It's the Indian spot.
You told me the last time. I'm like, let's go.
Dude, we should.
I have a gift card to Assembly Food Hall right now.
Yeah, bro. Like, we should do that place. Also telling you to Lavanetta. My favorite Italian spot.
Chef Laura, like, I can't wait to get her on the podcast and her story,
dude.
And her food is phenomenal. Guilty Grind with the pastries is phenomenal. There's a lot of sleepers in Gallatin, and I'm looking forward to being able to highlight those more.
Yeah.
And Hendersonville, Sumner County, Old County,
definitely. But going back to the Maemax, because I think I was like, dude, I crave it every day. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Like, I'm going.
Like, I can't afford this every day.
I'm taking a friend there tomorrow. But I think about, one thing I do miss is, like, growing up in a Filipino home is the cooking. Like, that's why I am the way I am, because my mom always cooked. Like, there's always rice. There was always, like, anytime my friends would come over, the first thing is like, do you want chicken? Like, do you want food? Like, do you want, and my mom would just be a beast in the kitchen, and like, when I left the West Coast, it was like, I was like, man, I don't think I'd ever have that experience again. And then, I found Maemax through a friend, another Filipino friend of mine. And they're like, oh, have you ever been to the Filipino joint in Madison? I was like, excuse me?
Why is there Filipino joining medicine?
First of all, yeah, like, let's talk about this. What? And then, I met the owner, Chris, and his wife, and they just remind me of my cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just reminded me of my family. And being away from family, I was just like, this is nice. And then I took a bite of the food that I grew up with, and I was just like, oh my gosh, there's something nostalgic, and like this is literally like my comfort home, my comfort food, my comfort restaurant that I go to pretty often and always, and just like, oh gosh, the soup, the rice, the garlic rice, the pork belly, all the things,
the halo
desserts. They even have a market next attached to it. I'm finding all these things that I would grow up with in that market. I'm just like, I just feel like I'm at home,
Awesome.
That's why I was like, I bring everybody there. It's kind of like a rite of passage if you're my friend. Like
mine's Hattie B's, but
yeah.
Maemax is, it definitely has a special place.
Yeah.
Check them out if you have not been to Maemax. John, thank you so much for coming on to the XPLR.NASH podcast. Where can people give you a follow?
Yeah, man. It's just John Mediana everywhere online. That's me, Diana. Like, media's in my name, so it's like me, Diana.
Just remember when his first word was content, mama.
Content. I mean, if your last name has media in it, like, you gotta somewhat have to have
a media background.
Yes,
Content, mama.
Content, mommy.
Yeah, I think we need to meme that. So, John, thank you so much.